Yep. And so kind of as a result of that new guidance, new information that we have, it kind of leads us to the conclusion that urban projects with a shorter repayment period, illustrated at the top of this chart, where funds are coming back, year 3, year 4, but that's well beyond the minimum 2-year sustainment period that investors, theoretically, who come in before this settlement, would be able to take advantage of. And so we believe that this is going to cause increased interests in some of these shorter term urban projects for the time being until a settlement is reached, just for this particular reason. But again, a settlement is not guaranteed, but that's kind of the best information that we have available that we can share. All right, let's switch gears. And Mike, do you want to tell us a little bit about President Trump's recent announcement, and then we'll talk a little bit about some urban and rural projects that we think are compelling options for investors given some of this new information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say this was the real curveball last Tuesday. So in one of Trump's press conferences, as you probably know, he likes to shoot from the hip and throw out some ideas that haven't been fully baked. And he made an announcement that the U.S. wants to do a gold card program. I'm sure everybody has seen the articles on X, the press releases, the clips of him and everything, and his commerce secretary. So you'll notice that he wants to increase the investment amount to $5 million, offer foreigners some special tax benefits. And at first it was just a gold card program. Then in the next meeting, it was about replacing the EB-5 program, then modifying the EB-5 program. So I'd say one of the key takeaways that we have is this is not a fully baked plan. It has not been vetted all the way through to how it actually works to implement a new program like the gold card program, or to how to change an existing program like the EB-5 program. And whether or not he's serious about doing this, replacing EB-5, or if it's more of a talking point that he wants to get this through, it's yet to be seen and how Congress will react. But this is something that less than a week ago really caught us all off guard, and everybody's been scrambling. And can he do this? What will happen? And I think that's what we'll talk about a little bit more here. So first, within the EB-5 program, Congress is the one that has the authority to set up immigration laws. And I'll let Ahmed talk a little bit more about that. But the president can't just change the immigration law in an approved program by Congress because he feels like it. So Ahmed, do you want to go in a little bit more of how this works with Congress actually being the one to make immigration law and how that would need to be changed if there was to be a modification to the Reform and Integrity Act?
Yeah, and I think the word that's thrown out a lot is plenary power, right? And essentially, this is something that's been well established through multiple Supreme Court holdings over the years, that Congress has plenary power, meaning basically all the power when it comes to immigration law in the United States. Anytime the Immigration and Nationality Act, which is ultimately the act that is statutorily written in and controls many aspects of the immigration system as we know it today, to have any updates or changes to that typically would require congressional approval. There are, different kinds of ways that he could still try to get it through Congress, and we've kind of seen that here at the bottom with the legislative process, but largely this would take some time, first of all, right? You don't just wake up one day and have a bill written in front of you and then go vote on it. It's a lot more substantive of a process. And it would also require, some kind of literature or idea of what this gold card program even looks like. And outside of, a couple of press conferences where he's mentioned, 2 or 3 facets of it, we haven't seen anything workable or any real written kind of explanation of what the gold card would entail. And so those two things would have to happen kind of simultaneously, right? If he's looking to replace or amend or add to the EB-5 program with the gold card program, he would need to show us what the gold card program even is, and we haven't even gotten that. Any hint of that really from any sources or any news so far. So yeah, I'll kick it back to you, Mike, to talk about maybe what would have to happen or what the different outcomes could be. But just from a procedural perspective, it's an uphill battle to change the law, and especially the EB5 investor program, which was written in, bipartisan approval until 2027.
And that's the key point, is the RIA was a law that was passed to get through the Senate and overcome the filibuster, needs 60 votes, so it needs to be bipartisan. So even if Trump wanted to bulldoze something through with his slim Republican majority to do the gold card and kill EB5, it would be very questionable if he could do that through budget reconciliation or another process, and probably he would need the 60 votes to be able to change the immigration law. And the good news is there have been a lot of great articles written by leading law firms in the industry and outside of the industry and other trade groups. So you can find a lot of good pieces online of people analyzing the situation, and that'll go a little bit more in depth than we will here. But in short, it is not something that Trump can do unilaterally. He will need congressional approval to change the EB5 program in any material way. So the good news is that EB5 is intact for now, and as part of the Reform and Integrity Act law, there are grandfathering provisions that if investors file before the September of 2026, they're treated under the same rules as when they filed. So there's a lot of things in place which make it very hard for Trump to do anything quickly and impact current investors, and even to change this before the end of the RIA. Nothing's impossible, but just procedurally, it will be very challenging for him to do what he said of within a couple of weeks change the EB5 program and implement this new gold card program.
Yeah, and just really quickly to add to that, and Sam, I'll kick it over to you to kind of take us from there. But I think that one of the just totally lost my train of thought. All right, I'll just kick it over to Sam. I'm sure I'll remember soon.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, I think just high level, everything is the same today as it was a week ago. However, with this announcement, it does make it more likely that in 2 years from now, in September 27, that the program may not get renewed, right? And so what that really means is for investors who are considering making an investment, who don't have $5 million lying around that they can just donate to the U.S. government. This is kind of a good future indication that the president isn't in favor of it, and if it just continues but then is up for renewal where there's an affirmative vote needed for it to keep going, that it makes it less likely that that will happen in the future, right? And anyone who invests before then, especially before September of 26, which is the grandfathering cutoff language in the current rules, so about 18 months from today, is going to be protected under the current rules. And so yeah, it's just sort of an important aspect of this to consider if you are considering making an EB5 investment in the next year or two, how this may not be available in the next couple of years, completely separately from this near-term settlement issue, but just big picture, something to consider. If it's something you may not be ready to explore in the next month, but maybe it's something in the next year, this is a good piece of information to be aware of.
And one thing that I forgot to mention, and just being in the industry for over a decade, EB5 is never discussed by the president. A lot of congressional representatives don't even know about the program. It's handled by staffers in the negotiations. This has really pushed it forward to where everyone knows what EB5 is now. When the president mentions it twice in 2 days as one of his priorities in a press conference and then in his first cabinet meeting, it really pushes this to where it's on everyone's radar. When before, most congressmen, most senators wouldn't even know what EB5 is or would have a very brief idea. So I'd say one good outcome from this is investment by immigration is definitely being pushed to the forefront and going to be part of the discussion. So EB5 is as it is for now. This will probably bring that conversation of the renewal of the EB5 program forward to sooner rather than later, of not waiting until 2027 or 2026 to try and get it through. But I'd say it is interesting within the industry to see there finally being a focus on this, although for most investors that probably doesn't really matter. It's more important, what are the rules as you invest and how certain is it to get the green card?
Yeah, and I remembered what I was going to say is our second point right here. all of us have been around enough to know kind of what led to the impetus of the grandfathering clause, and that was something that was really, really important in the RIA, right? We've been around long enough to see EB5 go through kind of its peaks and valleys, and in the past we had situations where the program was not reauthorized, and investors who were already invested and had already filed their applications were left in limbo because there wasn't clear guidance that USCIS would still pick up their case and adjudicate it. And so there was a really big focus put on the grandfathering aspect of the RIA to protect current investors and make sure that investors never again really had to worry about making sure that their case would proceed through the system as long as it was filed and if the program changed later on. So I think that, what we've seen, not just from, USCIS and their, their new policy changes and things like that, but from stakeholders, from congressmen, from everyone who's been involved in the EB5 rulemaking process, they all recognize that it's very important that investors feel comfortable making their investment, knowing that future changes are not going to affect them. And I think that's going to be a big part of the conversation, no matter what changes we see in the future, is that investors who are already in are protected. Investors who continue to file until some new changes are adopted, whether that be 6 months from now or 2 years from now, they are still going to be adjudicated under the current standards, because that was a really big priority of the RIA and one of the most important aspects of that law.